When did you start to find your own sense of purpose? Because you come out of USC, you're thinking of going to law school, and you get your first break in this extraordinary way. Brian overheard somebody saying, I had this really easy job at Warner Brothers. And you thought, well, that easy job, that sounds good.
Sounds like my life.
If only.
If only. So okay. So look. Basically, very similar to your situations. You guys, I guess, are graduating soon, or at some point very soon. And I thought, well, what job am I going to do before I go to law school? And I didn't. I thought law school was more of like a guillotine. I didn't really think I would make it. I just thought this is one of a few ways to potentially get respect, to go to law school.
Your dad was a lawyer.
My dad was a lawyer. So it just seemed like a direction. And in any event, so I'm in this little apartment complex which I'm living, and I overhear these two guys talking about how they just graduated law school. One of them said, yeah, I had a law clerk job. It was like the cushiest job possible. And I thought, wow, funny word, cushy. And the guy said, really? Yeah, it was so great. It was so easy. So I literally opened the screen, the window, and closed the drape so I could really press my ear up against the, like the screen. And I heard exactly where the guy was working. He said, Warner Brothers, the legal department. My boss was named Peter Connect. And so the minute when they walked away, I just called and got the number of Warner Brothers just through information, called, can I have the legal department? Can I please speak to Mr. Connect? He's busy. Well, I'm going to be a law school student at USC. Can I speak to him for a moment? I've heard that he might need a law clerk, because this guy just quit that day. And so,
wow.
I'm not even kidding. Mm-hmm. And so I said, can I come in? I came in at 4 o'clock in the afternoon, and I got the job. So all of a sudden, I didn't know what a law clerk was, but I had this tiny little office about as big as the space from here to the end of this carpet, with no window, just a little desk, tiny little desk, little phone, and it was a 40-hour-a-week job. They gave you gas money and a corporate car that you left in the parking lot, but you had this corporate car, and the job was when they needed papers, official Warner Brothers papers, to be delivered, I'd deliver the papers. So for several days, I had nothing to do. I just sat in this little office. And one day, I had to deliver papers to somebody. The second time I had to deliver documents to somebody, it happened to be Warren Beatty.
Oh, wow.
And Warren Beatty was living, where he lived was in the Beverly Wilshire Hotel.
Right, yeah.
And so I drive to the Beverly Wilshire Hotel, and in the lobby, I meet with Warren Beatty's assistant, or maybe it was the assistant of an assistant. And I said, I have these papers for Mr. Beatty. I have to get him these papers. And they said, well, just hand them to me. And it just occurred to me in this flash moment that I'll say to him, well, these papers are invalid unless I hand them directly to Mr. Beatty.
Wow.
So I just invented that. And then the guy said, well, I don't know if is that really accurate? I go, look, that's what I'm told. The papers are only valid if they're handed directly to him. These are very important documents. If he'd like the papers, I have to be directly handing them to him. So all of a sudden, I'm with Warren Beatty in his room. He's got this giant suite, and I'm in a living room, and he comes out. I create a conversation with him that becomes kind of self-perpetuating, turns into another hour, and all of a sudden, I've talked to Warren Beatty for an hour. So now I think, well, I can do this every single time. And which I do, with Sue Mingers. She was the most important agent, in the city of, in Hollywood, represented Steve McQueen and Paul Newman, endless amounts of movie stars. I do that with her. I did it with William Peter Blatty, who wrote the book The Exorcist. He had a beach house in Malibu. Someone said the same thing, just hand me the papers. All of a sudden, I'm sipping espressos on the porch, on the,
wow.
on the beach. So. And that would go on to meet with, I've met with Charles Bronson. I drank a mimosa with him, in his house. I didn't know what I was doing. I was just doing these conversations, but I was learning a lot. I was able to demystify how leverage was created in a creative environment. And that was gigantically valuable to me, because it's understanding the vocabulary and understanding how the ether works is the way to actually create leverage or understand how to get it to to accomplish a creative endeavor. So I then told my boss. This is a long story, but I'll go quickly. I then told my boss.
We're in no hurry. So
All right,
we like the details.
So I then told my boss I'm going to stay on and I'm going to go to law school the following year, and he said fine. And then within a couple of weeks, again another fortuitous event occurred. This huge office opened up right outside the executive cadre of offices, which was the chairman of the board, the vice chairman of the board of Warner Brothers Pictures, and the president, who was Frank Wells, who worked for Disney and was very important to the foundation of the new Disney. Anyways, so this giant office opened up, which was almost like a third of the size of this room. And I say to my boss, Peter Connect, would you mind if I had that office?
Wow.
That office was twice as big as his office, but he didn't care. He'd started with Jack Warner. He left work 12:30, 1 o'clock, in the afternoon. So it was fine. He said, take it. So all of a sudden, I had this giant office, and I kind of turned it into the Brian Grazer business at Warner Brothers.
Wow.
And so I used all the Warner resources, to sort of the betterment or the education of Brian Grazer. And within a year, I'd really learned a lot, and I was still doing these conversations. But it was one very seminal conversation and I reached out to Lew Wasserman, who was the most important, sort of the patriarch of kind of modern entertainment from an executive vantage point, and he ran Universal Studios, and he basically kicked me out of his office. It took me a very long time to meet with him, but he kicked me out of the office, and he just said, look, you don't really have anything to say. I understand you work at Warner Brothers, and I understand in the letter that you wrote me that you don't want a job. But this thing, we're done. And I said, well, we've only spoken about a minute. And he said, just 1 second. He came back with a pencil, a 2H pencil, and a big legal tablet, and he said, hold these two items. If you put the pencil onto the paper, it has greater value than it did as separate parts. So get out of here, So I get in the elevator, and I realized basically what he said was in order to have value, you had to either create or manufacture ideas that had value that you could breathe life into, and that's I started writing ideas. I got fired from Warner Brothers, of course.
Oh no.
Well, it was about time. They already removed my parking. But then I started writing, and I was able to write some movies for television and TV pilots that I ended up getting made when I was about 25 or 26 years old, and then wrote Splash, a couple of drafts of Splash, and got that made as well. And so I started just sort of creating ideas that I could, and nobody knows if any idea has value. You have to animate it, and I was able to do that.
So
I think that's democratized. Curiosity and creating ideas, ironically, are both democratized. They cost no money. Anyone can do them. And it's up to the individual and the force of their personality to give life to them.